Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome back to another one of my interviews here on Drip Talk with Blake Roberts. Today I have a very rare and special guest on with me today. He is a former pro wrestler, actor, and musician. He's wrestled for the companies WWF, WCW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and CWA. He was famously in a tag team with Cactus Jack, also known as Mick Foley, who I have also had on my podcast previously. He is no other than Man Mountain Rock, also known as Maxx Payne. So we will get him on in here, and then we will start on with the interview.
Good evening, sir.
Hello. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good. It's Blake, right?
Yes, correct.
How you doing, Blake?
I'm doing great. I thank you for taking your time to do this.
My pleasure.
All right. So, first thing I'll ask you is, what have you been doing since your wrestling career? What have you been up to?
Oh man, my life has been, since I left the wrestling business. I pursued all kinds of other endeavors. I ran a music studio. I was in several video games. I did a number of different acting gigs. I ran a home theater installation company. Electronics is something I'm really attached to. I love working on electronics. I love cars. So I have a profound interest in old muscle cars. So the list is pretty broad since I left the wrestling.
Yeah. Wow, you've been keeping yourself busy since then.
You gotta keep moving, right?
Yep, of course. All right. Since we've learned what you've been doing so far, how did you get into the wrestling business, and what made you want to do that?
Well, my career started in wrestling at a very early age. I believe I was in second or third grade, and we had a local program that a coach had just moved to our town, the new wrestling coach in our town, and started a little kids program. So I knew about it at a very early age. Interestingly enough, I didn't like wrestling. I tried it, and then I didn't like it that much. And then in seventh grade, I started to play football. I was really intending on playing football. Mm-hmm. And the football coach told me that if I was going to play football, that I had to wrestle as well. And I went, "Oh, okay, I'll do that too." So I actually, all through high school, and interestingly enough, I was only in high school a total of 2 years. From ninth grade to my senior year, I was only in high school for 2 years, and I'll explain that in just a second. But my freshman year, I had a heck of a year. As a freshman in high school, I wrestled varsity 4 or 5 times and did really well. And I started to prepare for my wrestling career as a sophomore, and I crashed on a motorcycle and destroyed my left knee. And right at the beginning of wrestling season. So I missed my sophomore wrestling season, and actually missed the first half of my sophomore year in high school because I had a cast up to my hip because I completely destroyed my knee. Anterior cruciate, medial lateral collateral meniscus, and I had complete reconstruction. I was 14 at the time. And then I went back my junior year, and I prepared and worked really, really hard to be on the wrestling team, and really devoted a whole lot of my effort to being a state champion that year. And midway through the season of my junior year of wrestling, a wrestling movie showed up to my hometown called
Mhm.
Takedown. It starred Lorenzo Lamas, Edward Herman, Kathleen Lloyd, Maureen McCormick, Nicholas Bovey. List goes on. It was amazing. It was an amazing thing, and I actually went out of my way to not be in this movie, and they actually sought me out to be in this movie, and they gave me a
Wow.
pretty major role in this movie, and so I ended up doing that, and at the same time, I wrestled. I wrestled for the wrestling team for my high school, the Pleasant Grove Vikings. So not only was I working, I know this sounds crazy, but I was working anywhere from 12 to 15, 16 hours a day on the movie set for 10 weeks. But I also was wrestling for my high school, and I literally would drive myself sometime to dual meets because I couldn't even ride on the bus with my teammates because I was busy shooting this movie. And so I
Right.
shot the movie. Pardon me.
Right.
So anyway, I shot the movie, and after the movie, my life turned upside down because of the movie. The movie absolutely changed my life. By the time the movie was done being shot, I had my future wife. She was pregnant, and my first son was born 2 months after the movie came out in 1978. So in the year 1978, I was second at the region, second at state without any practice, just going out there and having worked in the movie all day and then going to wrestle in these matches. But it was enough um, for Oklahoma State to see me and want to recruit me. And in
Hmm.
the end, they had a huge impact. Oklahoma State did on finding me a junior college program where I went to for 2 years. And then I ended up going to Iowa State for 3 years, ended up being a three-time All-American amateur wrestler and a national champion on a national championship team. And then when I finished that, I actually had gone back to college to get a degree in television and film, and I did so. And then I moved after I graduated from Iowa State University in 1985. I moved to Los Angeles, and the rest is, so they say, it's history. I met Red Bastien, and Red Bastien gave me a job building the ring and the cage for the WWF in Los Angeles. And he trained me how to be a wrestler, and then that's where I met with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And they give me a gig, and I went to Japan, and then all the rest of my wrestling history started. My pro wrestling history started from there.
Yeah. Right. Wow. What a story. I mean, you've been
And
like
that's
all over
obvious.
here and there. I mean,
That's a quick summary.
right. Yeah. I mean, wow. To do all that with the amateur wrestling is just a great story to tell. And then the
Thank
movie
you. I'm
that you
very
did.
proud.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about the love of music and wanting to be a musician? Where did that all come about? I bet it came from like you as a young age.
From the time I was I was an oops in my family. My next closest brother to me is 12 years older than me, and my oldest brother is 24 years older than me and has two children older than I am. And so by the time I was born, by the time I was 4 years old, all of my brothers had moved out of the house and had their own families. So I was
Wow.
almost an only child. And so from the time I was conceived, my mother played me all of the amazing music that she loved. Bach and Beethoven and Mussorgsky and Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky and the list goes on. And she really introduced me to symphony at the time, but not to rock and roll. And So as I started to grow up, man, she started giving me piano lessons when I was literally 5 years old. If I would have stuck with piano lessons, I would have been a concert pianist. I to this day, I regret like crazy that I didn't stick with my piano lessons. But I realized at a very early age, I found a Little Richard 45 record. Most people don't even know what a 45 is, especially the younger generations. But it was basically a single, and it came. They were called 45s. They had a big hole in the middle, and you would buy that one song, and then there was one other song on the other side. And my brothers had left 3 or 4 45s behind at our house, and I found them. And I think my mother always regretted that, because once I heard Little Richard and rock and roll, I was hooked. And so I started wanting to play the guitar. I actually started playing the guitar when I was about 10 years old. And my brothers, I got the hand-me-downs of my brothers at that time. And so I just started playing music at that time, but wasn't as devoted to it as I was when I got to college. I really decided I really wanted to dig into the guitar, and I did. And I had a really great friend in college by the name of Carol Altman, who worked with me in the television station I worked at in college. And we became good friends. And he taught me what's called 1-4-5, or the blues, the basic blues. And I'd already read a lot about that. If you really wanted to play rock and roll, you had to understand 1-4-5 or the blues. Read a lot about Edward Van Halen. Was my absolutely, guitar god. Him and Brian May from Queen were probably the 2 most notable guitar heroes that I loved so much when I was, very young. And so I just started playing the guitar seriously with Carol. And what's really amazing about 1-4-5 and the blues is it's really designed to share. And so, you learn a 12-bar turnaround, and it's so magical. And once you kind of learn the fundamentals of it, it captivated me for sure. And so that's where my absolute beginnings of my love for the guitar began.
Wow. Yeah, I used to play guitar, like a little guitar, when I was younger, and just sing around my room and stuff. I thought I was gonna grow up playing the guitar myself, because actually still I kind of want to play the guitar and learn it. I learned it a little bit in music class and how to play it when I was in middle school.
Yeah.
And then it just went away. But I'm a singer, so I do that.
Well, that's good. Hey, if the fun thing about 1-4-5 and about the blues is you can literally play the blues on 2 strings. And if you learn the fundamentals of the blues, it's the reason it's so amazing is, first of all, it sounds, we all love it. It has a soul touching experience to it. And once you learn it, and it's so accessible, I don't want to say it's easy, because that makes it sound like, but I do believe that the blues, I believe anybody could play the blues if you're taught by somebody who had the patience of who, like I had, my beginning teacher in Carol Altman, who was so patient with me and showed me how it worked, and showed me what to do, showed me just the, within literally, if you have any guitar experience at all, within literally 1 or 2 lessons of somebody who can teach you how to play the fundamentals of the blues, you can be playing, and you can play almost any rock and roll song, just fundamental rock and roll songs, Beach Boys, like I said, any of the rock and roll from the 50s and 60s, almost all of those hits are all based around the 145 of the blues. And so, you don't ever have to give up on it. If you really want to learn how to play the guitar, I would recommend to you highly, go find out what 145 means, and you'll see that it might be an avenue. If you haven't pursued it, you might want to go at least investigate it.
Of course. Yeah. Now, for the wrestling side of things again, is out of all the wrestling companies you've got to work and wrestle for, which one would you say you have liked working for the most?
Well, I worked for two CWAs. I worked for Jerry Lawler's CWA first. That was Championship Wrestling out of Memphis. And then I was recruited by Otto Vaughn and wrestled for the CWA in Germany, in Bremen and Hanover and Vienna, Austria, and Graz, Austria. So I wrestled in Europe for 2 seasons. In the beginning of a 3rd season, that's when I finally decided I'd had enough of the wrestling business, and I left the wrestling business. I have to say that probably the funnest time I had in the wrestling business was in Germany. The 2 seasons I was there, the people that I meet, the people that I got to know, the people who I really thought were my friends and who ended up being people who were instrumental in my life in helping me develop the Maxx Payne character and the guitar playing character, that all happened in Germany. And so Germany meant a whole lot to me.
Yeah. And I bet, was like the wrestling different in Germany than from the States? Because I know like Japan wrestling was different from the States. Right. Was Germany any different than the state wrestling?
Yeah. Germany wrestles in rounds. So it's a lot different, and it's called catch in Germany. It's called catch as catch can. And the CWA stood for the Catch Wrestling Alliance in Germany. So, they wrestle in rounds. And so you'd have 5 3-minute rounds. And so after the end of a round, you'd get, a 30-second break, and then the match would start again. And it's a completely, not completely, but it's a different kind of mentality, a different kind of a way of wrestling, and I loved it. And I learned from the greats. I was very honored to have learned from a group of guys who in the end were very, very kind to me, and were very generous in teaching me the business and teaching me how to be a better wrestler. And then in the end, were the ones who really opened up the actual musical side as well as the wrestling side. Was really encouraged by one wrestler in particular, was Dave Finley, is actually the guy who probably pushed me harder than anybody to exploit my musical talents as a wrestler. And because of Dave Finley, he's actually the one that really drove me hard to pursue my musical side of the wrestling industry as well.
Wow. That's interesting to know. Surprised. Like, I've never heard that Finley did that. So that's interesting.
Yeah. It's one of those stories that, it just doesn't get out that much, just because a lot of times people don't ask those kinds of questions. But Dave Finley was instrumental in me playing music and being the musical wrestler.
Nice. So did you like working under the Man Mountain Rock or Maxx Payne persona more?
Well, the problem with the Man Mountain Rock persona was that the Man Mountain Rock persona, unfortunately, was, one of those things that wasn't mine. And it's something that Vince demanded I do. And as a result of that, it's just not something that I have that fond of memories of, because, it's just one of those things that it wasn't who I was. So the Man Mountain Rock, Mick Foley said it. I was kind of defrocked of my Maxx Payne character. And so I always felt, like I said, the Man Mountain Rock character wasn't something that I developed. It's something that the WWF wanted to develop for me, and it just didn't fit who I was at my core. And so, if I would have had any more time there, I would have developed into a different kind of character, but that wasn't to be.
Do you mind sharing on what that character would have been? What your ideas were?
Well, I would have demanded back into the Maxx Payne character. I would have said, if you really want me to stick around and do this, I would have eventually brought out the Maxx Payne character. It's kind of funny. Mankind started in the WWF with the dark thing, and then ended up with the Dude Love thing, which was the tie-dyed guy. And then, I started with the tie-dyed guy, and I would have liked to have evolved into the darker character, or, a dark Max kind of character. So, sorry, I got
that would have
out my window with the chainsaw right now. Wouldn't you know it's 7 o'clock.
No, that's fine.
Chainsaw. I hope you can't hear. I'm sure you can probably hear it, but hopefully it won't last very long.
Yeah, just a tiny bit, barely, but it's all right.
Okay, good.
What was your full reaction to getting asked the first time to wrestle and get welcomed into WCW and WWF?
Well, another person who had a profound influence on me when I was in Germany was Rip Rogers.
Okay.
And I consider Rip to be one of the few people in the wrestling business that I consider to be a really true friend. He and I still to this day are very close. And, Rip loved him, and Dave Finlay were the two guys. Dave was the first guy that forced me to play out in public. He took me to an Oktoberfest, and I played in front of a bunch of drunk Germans, and they freaked out and loved it. And then the hook was in, and I couldn't wait to play again in front of a crowd. And then when I started playing in front of the wrestling crowds in Germany, and the people in Germany started to really dive into the character I'd created, Rip Rogers supported me the whole way. In fact, Rip was there the night that I played at the Oktoberfest. He came with us to that. And then he was there and watched everything I did in the ring, and supported me and gave me tips and how to be better, and, how to do the things, to make my character better. So Rip Rogers was hugely influential. And the biggest influence Rip had is when Rip went home after my second season, right before we left Bremen, Germany, Rip called Cowboy Bill Watts on the phone at the WCW and said, "Bill, you got to meet this guy." And Bill was willing to do that because Bill was a mark for shooters, for amateur wrestlers. And because I had an amateur background, that got me through the door. And then when he found out about the musical side of things, and then I went and met Bill and went to Atlanta and got to talk to them, it was a pretty logical conclusion that they give me a contract. And Bill put me to work by February of that year.
Wow. That's a great way to get in,
Yeah,
from
Rip was
yeah,
instrumental. You know, that's usually how you get into the big organizations. I did,
yeah,
however, have some other connections and ways into the WWF, but
yeah,
I didn't want to. I wasn't ready. I was more excited to do the WCW at the time because WWF was really struggling, and the
yeah,
WCW had guaranteed money, and you know I had a family, and I was trying to survive, and so the WCW was very attractive, and they wanted they was completely behind me being Maxx Payne, so that was easy.
right. Yeah, so they made you feel more comfortable in what you wanted to do instead of like the WWF made you into something
Right,
that you weren't really interested in doing.
right.
Yeah.
Well, the WWF, the sad part about the WWF is they wouldn't even let me play my own guitar on the wrestling promos, like the promos that they were cutting for me. The only time I ever got to play my guitar live in the WWF is when I was going to the ring. And when I went on the last tour that I was on when I went to Germany, even the WWF, really, it was, you know, it was a not a good relationship in terms of the musical
Wow.
side. Besides that, I had some people in the clique that really didn't like me and didn't want me around. And so it was one of those things that it was, you know, it was an uphill battle. And yeah, the WCW, by the same token, they never exploited my musical talents either. So, you know,
Hmm.
it was just one of those things that the musical thing, I realized in the end, the musical thing probably in the end sort of cost me my wrestling career, so to speak. If I would have just focused on being a wrestler, I probably would have had a little bit better time. But no one knew what to do with me, and I had a lot of voices actually sort of plowing against me. So it was one of those things that it just didn't work out. It was just a thing that should not be, you know.
Right. Totally understandable. Yeah. What is a big like memory and or match of yours that you'll never forget from your time in the WW or WCW? My bad. Sorry.
Oh, there's no doubt. The biggest match that I had in the WCW was the Chicago Street Fight with Mick against the Nasty Boys. Our run against the Nasty Boys to me was, you know, it's sad because it really never got manifested to the level it could have for again a whole bunch of a great story, a lot of incredible reasons, but it was just not to be. But I think that the few matches that we did have were amazing. The run we had with the Nasty Boys
Hmm.
were amazing, and looking back in retrospect, to me, there's no doubt. I had a couple of good matches with Johnny B. Bad and had a little run with Johnny, but I just once again I just didn't get that much opportunity in the WCW either. And again, there's a lot of reasons behind that, but
Yeah. And then there was also a match that you and Cactus had against the Nasty Boys at Super Brawl 4. And there was like a fall thing that happened that didn't go planned. If you don't mind sharing that story.
which one are you talking about?
I'm pretty sure it was at like Super Brawl 4 and there was a fall that didn't go planned and then Knobs broke his shoulder, if I'm correct.
Yeah. You know, I've talked about this a lot, and the truth of the matter is if somebody wants to hear the full definition behind that story, Knobs, you know, Knobs didn't trust anybody in the business, and I warned him that night that if he didn't trust me and fall and let me control the throws, that I was going to take them no matter what. And if you watch that, like I said, on my YouTube channel on the Pain Lair, I go over and over and over it again because I threw a lot of people with a belly to belly and a trapped arm But Knobs was bound and determined to control that fall. And honestly, I don't care what anybody says, including Brian. I'll tell him right to his face. I didn't hurt Brian. Brian hurt himself because he didn't trust me. The reason he didn't trust me is because the Nasty Boys didn't trust anybody at the time because they hurt a lot of people. And there were a lot of people gunning for him. There were a lot of people that the Nasty Boys had hurt. And, so it was one of those moments in time where, like I said, I had a great wrestler tell me something once, and I lived by it. A guy named Bill Eadie, and was part of Demolition. And Bill said to me, "No, Max, there comes a time in your wrestling career when you have to say no. And if you don't say no, the only one to blame is the man in the mirror." And this was the night where, I had been, I'd been the guy. I was always the low guy on the totem pole when it came to, the stuff. And it was just one of those moments where I said, no, I'm going to get my shit in tonight. And, and it didn't go, like I said, Knobs didn't trust me. And as a result, that's what, he got hurt. And I would face any amateur or professional wrestler with a videotape in hand to watch that throw, and I'll prove to them, to their face, that the reason Knobs got hurt is because he tried to control the fall himself. If he would have let me protect him, which I had his arm trapped, and I was going to throw him out of the ring so he wouldn't get hurt. He tried to go straight over. And I'm 350 pounds and I know how to make a throw go. And he tried to stop it and he went the wrong direction. And as a result of that, he got hurt.
Wow. Yeah. I actually watched that before the interview, not like a couple hours ago. And I could see that it was kind of his fault. I could see what you're talking about and saying, because he didn't kind of do the move right or whatever.
Yeah, well, he didn't trust me. The bottom line is he didn't trust me because like I said, anybody knows the business and knows the Nasty Boys, they know what I'm talking about. And in the end, that's what matters. But if you're on the outside, like I've heard Arn Anderson say a few things about the throw, and I would love to sit with Arn and say, I'll sit and watch it with you and we'll explain it. And I believe I could convince Arn that in my favor. I really do, because I think you'd see exactly what I'm talking about, especially when you consider the guy on the receiving end was Brian Knobs. So I'll let the video speak for itself. If anybody wants to go and watch it, I've highlighted it and I've been very explicit about it on my YouTube channel called The Pain Lair on YouTube. There's a whole rundown about that match, and I show the throw over and over again, and I explain it completely. So if you have any questions and anybody wants to go watch it for themselves, you can go find out once and for all that I wasn't at fault on that night, and I got blamed. That match and that throw cost me a lot in the business, because Knobs and Sags were good friends with Hogan and good friends with Vince, and it made it very difficult for me to carry on after that too, because they spent a lot of time burying me after that.
Wow.
But I will say this. I love them both. I think the world of both Brian Knobs and Jerry Sags. I have, like I said, I had some of the most spectacular times. In fact, I will say in the WCW, the best times of my life were with Knobs and Sags outside the ring. And I'm in the process of working out a deal to write my book, and there'll be a lot of the stories about this in the book when it comes out. I'm hoping that if everything goes well, by the end of next year or the first of 2027, I'll have my book done.
Oh, sweet. That'd be good. I like reading books about wrestlers, so that'd be something that I'd be interested in getting too. So definitely.
Well, if that, once the book comes out, you'll have to have me back on, and then you can ask me more questions.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. Out of what has been like your favorite? Who has been your favorite wrestler that you've got to go against like in your whole entire career? Or list maybe like a few, because it's probably hard to choose just one.
Well, if I'm going to choose one, it's going to be Dave Finley. I probably learned more from Dave Finley than anybody I ever learned from. I got to tell you, man, I had a couple of matches with Leon, with Vader, and I wish like hell I could have had I wish I could have had a run with Vader, because I think he and I could have put on a show that very few people could replicate, because he and I weren't afraid to beat the shit out of each other. I wasn't afraid to do shit the hard way, because I broke in Japan. In Japan, when they teach you the wrestling business in Japan, they do it the hard way. And so, Vader was somebody that meant a lot to me. I got to work with Steamboat, and it was just a pleasure. I got to work with a lot of really great people. I got to work with Steve Austin, and as a tag team partner, I believe. And there were a lot of wrestlers that I just really, really enjoyed working with. But I got to tell you, Dave Finley, David Taylor, another German wrestler, Steve Wright, another German wrestler, and God, anybody that I'm forgetting, forgive me, because there were a lot of people along the way that I worked with that were absolutely a pleasure to work with. Z-Man, Tom Zank, he was my first match in the WCW, and I'll never forget when he walked in the dressing room after I put the painkiller on him. Everybody thought I destroyed his arm and his shoulder. And he walked in and he was still selling it, and then he started to laugh. And I go, God, are you okay? And he goes, oh my God, that was the easiest move I've ever taken. And so I was really fortunate to work with some really, really, really wonderful people and go down the road with some really great guys. Hawk, Rick Rude, like I said, Owen Hart, Louis Muccioli, Rad Radford, and the list goes on. And like I said, I'm sure there's people in there that I'm forgetting that I wouldn't want to offend them, because there were a lot of other. Johnny B. Bad was a pleasure to work with. Absolutely a pleasure.
Definitely.
And the Nasty Boys. I mean, I'll be clear. I loved working with the Nasty Boys. I wasn't afraid to work with the Nasty Boys, because I wasn't afraid of them hurting me, because I wasn't afraid to give it back to them, as you can plainly see.
Of course, yeah. Who is one wrestler that you've never got to get in the ring with that you wish you could have?
I would have loved to have worked with Taker. I really would have loved to work with Mark. I think if they would have done me right in the WWF, and things would have worked out better, and I'm just gonna flat out, I've said this before, and I'm not afraid to say it. I was no angel. I was very difficult at that time to work with in a lot of ways. But Taker and I were always cordial to each other. Don't get me wrong. This has nothing to do with that. But I always believe that Mark's another guy that I would have loved to have had a run with Taker and done some things with Taker, because I think, the darkness of who, if I could have eventually got to the Maxx Payne character, even maybe Taker bringing that character out in me, might have been really fun. The avenues we could have explored had they been more open-minded at the time, but it was not to be. So all I can do is go, wow, that would have been awesome.
Yeah. I mean, Just thinking about it, that would have been great, man. Maxx Payne versus Undertaker. That would have been a great like storyline, not just a match, but even like a storyline between you two would have been something to see.
I always dreamed that, and unfortunately, it just was not to be. And I'm totally to blame for it. That has nothing to do with anything other than a fantasy of mine. So if Mark ever heard this, that was just the way it worked out. And I was always sad that I never had that opportunity. And I'll be honest with you, like I said, I really, really would have liked to have had a run with Vader as Harley as his manager. And I think we could have really had some big man matches that people would have never forgotten.
Definitely. I agree. So on February 2nd, 1993, you got to perform the national anthem for the WCW pay-per-view and your first pay-per-view, WCW Super Brawl 3, where you also wrestled Dustin Rhodes later that night for the U.S. title. How did that moment feel for you, getting to do something that big in your career?
Oh, wow. It's so funny. Just you starting to lead up to it. Just brought back the memories of it. It was huge. For me, it was huge. And it's one of those moments in time that I think that there was a lot of missed opportunity from the WCW standpoint, that they could have made, a lot of money off me right then, had they realized that you don't have a guy go out and play the national anthem and do it well enough that people applauded me and realized I wasn't a heel. It was one of the most difficult nights of my life, because I went out there to be a heel, but the crowd didn't want to boo me because I just played the national anthem and they're cheering for me.
Yeah.
So how do you, if they would have been smart, they would have ran Vader out there while I was playing the national anthem, knocked me out, broke my guitar into 1,000 pieces, and we would imagine the angle that we could have started right then, that moment.
That would have been something.
Vader stopping me from playing the national anthem, and then the momentum would have been massive. But instead, they chose not to. And honestly, I only got to play the guitar in the WCW twice in a public forum. Once was when I played the national anthem, and then one other night they were running short on time and they needed somebody to fill, and they said, "Max, you're going to play." And I went out and played, and I wished I could find that match, because I went out and played, and I'll never forget, the crowd just exploded. It was really an amazing moment. And both times I ever played in front of the WCW, it was magic. And for whatever reason, they just couldn't see that I could make money that way. And I always regretted that. It always, I always felt sad that, because all I ever wanted to do was have a good run and make some money. And I think that with one promoter that would have had the foresight to see the potential and the money that we could have made, it would have been phenomenal. I mean, Vader could have, the great thing about it is, like I said, the fantasies are, Vader could have spent an entire match, beating up my hand. You know what I mean? Just because then would stop me from playing the guitar. The possibilities would have been limitless of what we could have done. But, that's all past. But it doesn't stop me from fantasizing about what could have happened had those moments ever have presented themselves.
Of course. I agree. That would have been just great. But, yeah. Whose idea was it to put you in that? Because later that night you also had a match with Dustin Rhodes. So whose idea was it to put you in that match? Because it was supposed to be Ron Simmons, who then got injured. So whose idea was it to put you in place of Ron Simmons?
Oh, I think it was Bill Watts. I think it was just, I think what happened is Ron Simmons didn't show up. They needed a replacement at the moment. Nobody had really thought out what they were going to do with me because they didn't know. They honestly, there'd never been anybody in the wrestling business do what I had done. So they, they just really didn't, nobody thought about that moment. And so as a result of that,
Right.
And it was a very difficult match because it was a babyface match. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's kind of hard to get over with the crowd with two baby faces.
Yeah, they sat on their hands, and it was hard, man. It was one of the hardest matches I've ever done because no matter what I did, the crowd was confused. They confused the crowd so horribly that night because, like I said, how do you, if I'd have gone out there and butchered the national anthem, well, that would have been different. Then it would have been easy for them to boo me and hate me. But I didn't butcher the national anthem. I played it well, and I'm proud of the way I played it that night. And I'll never forget Jesse Ventura after it and, coming in because that was the first time I had ever played in front of an American audience. And the first thing I do is play the national anthem. Hey, no pressure there, So you blow, everybody knows the national anthem. If you blow it, they're going to let you know. But they didn't. And the crowd, if you go watch it to this day, the crowd just did not know they didn't know how to handle it. And the management didn't know how to handle it. And there just wasn't, for whatever reason, I didn't get utilized in a way at that moment that really turned out and could have really turned into something magnificent.
Of course. So, like you talked in the beginning of the interview, you helped set up the steel cage for the main event of WrestleMania 2, which was Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy. How did you get put in that position, and how does it feel knowing that you got to do that for the second ever WrestleMania? And is there any behind the scenes stories or just experiences from the event getting to do that?
Oh, well, that event was absolutely the event that changed. I'd been building the ring for Red Bastien prior to that, and they put forth a challenge to me. This is the part that was exciting. This is actually when I won favor with a guy named Chief Jay Strongbow. Jay Strongbow and Pat Patterson came to me and said, how fast can you put this cage together? Because if you remember, that was the 3-ring circus mentality that year. And they said, how fast can you put this cage together? And I was the one that engineered building the cage that night. And the way I did it and made it fast was I called Red and I said, I've had a epiphany on how to build this cage and build it quickly. And he said, how's that? And I said, motorcycle straps. And he went, what? I said, I'm telling you, we can put the cage together with motorcycle straps and it will be as solid as a rock. And he said, well, then I want to experiment and I really want to figure out if it's as sturdy as you believe. And so in a yard in downtown Los Angeles, my nephew was actually, and I were together. He ended up being a wrestler for about 4 or 5 years. God rest his soul. He got in an auto accident and lost his life. His name was Scott Peterson. He wrestled in the Portland area. But Scott was there. I was trying to get him in, and ended up, he did get in the wrestling business through Red Bastien. But we were there building, to build his cage. And so I went to the store, went to the auto parts store, and I bought motorcycle tie downs. And I cut them all to length so that they were just exactly long enough to fit in to around the 2 bars of this cage. And the cage that Red had was made of pipe, steel pipe. It was very sturdy.
No.
It wasn't a fence cage. It was a cage everybody loved because it would take a pounding like you wouldn't believe. And it was easy to climb on. Chain link is very difficult to climb on, especially when you're tired. and you get your fingers in there and try to get your boots in there. Well, this cage was different. It had like 10-inch squares or 12-inch squares that were made out of pipe. And so the whole thing was just a big rectangle made out of pipe. And so I put those two pipes together in the corner and held them together with motorcycle straps. And we literally had that down to the point where we could construct that cage in 2 minutes. And so I directed the whole thing. We had it all set up. Red got me the guys that I needed, and we marched the cage out there. And what I did is, as the cage came out, I took the two corners on one edge of the ring, and I fastened these two. And while I was fastening these two, the other guys brought out the other side and put up the other side. And then my nephew, while I was doing the other side and building, this angle over here, attached those, he was attaching the other two corners. And we literally built that cage that night in 1 minute and 30 seconds. And Pat Patterson at the end of the night came up and gave me and my nephew a $500 bonus for that.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That's a great story right there.
And I got to stand there in front of the 18,000 people in the sports arena and feel what it felt like for Hogan to get a pop and to witness WrestleMania. And of course, I don't care who you are, what kind of a kid you are, what kind of a young man you are, to stand there and see that, I was hooked. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. And so I did. I spent the rest of, then I worked for Red until it was time for me. Then he got me the gig in Japan, and then I left and went to Japan.
Wow. That was great. I think you deserved a match on WrestleMania 2 for all that.
I would have stunk the place up. I was not ready, actually. I wasn't. So I do have kind of a little story about that. Is one night, one of the things as a wrestler that you're always taught is you always take your gear with you. Red told me, he said, you always bring your boots and you always bring your singlet and you always come to, even if you're building the ring or the cage, you make sure you bring your gear with you because you never know. Somebody might not show up, and that gives you an opportunity to get in the ring. So one night, Red comes to me and he says, did you bring your gear? And I said, well, of course, Red. He goes, go put it on. And I said, all right. So I go and put it on. And I go, and as we're walking, he goes, well, I go, what am I doing? What am I doing? He goes, there's a football player here from San Diego Chargers, and he thinks he can be a wrestler. And I want you to go out there and beat the fuck out of this guy. With real wrestling, right? I want you to go out there and just beat the shit out of this guy and let him know how tough wrestling is. And so, long story short, I go out there. This guy ties up with me, and he doesn't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch. And I had no choice, man. My bosses are sitting there, so I just spanked him. I just took him down and had him screaming and crying and stretched him, and and it didn't take but about 2 or 3 minutes, and we were done. And as soon as I walked out of the ring and that dude left, Jay Strongbow went to Red Bastien and said, I want him right now. Red said, no, Jay, he's not ready. He's going to Japan. Let him go to Japan first. You can have him as soon as he gets back from Japan. No, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, my God, I'm so glad. I'm like, Red, what are you doing? Of course I want to go. Stop it. I want to go right now. If I would have gone right then, my life would have been really, I'm so glad that Red, cooler heads prevailed, because it would have been a tough go for me. Very tough go, because I didn't know shit about the wrestling business yet. And I had a lot of learning to do, and I knew it. So I was okay very quickly. Red, he did a good job of calming me down and getting me to accept the fact that I had to pay my dues first. And I'm glad I paid my dues, because I paid my dues the right way. I worked really hard paying my dues.
Of course. At least he was smart of saying, no, wait,
Yeah, you might be able to argue that I'm, that I didn't make any money in the wrestling business, whether I'm smart or not. There's a certain number of people that might completely disagree with that, and sometimes I certainly feel that way myself. But no, it was a good decision.
Mm-hmm. What was it like getting to train in Japan, and what was like differences that you could see from the States and Japan? What are some like differences that you can tell?
Well, luckily I was kind of warned, but I have to say the luck was actually that I had no clue what I was in for.
Mm-hmm.
Japan was very, 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 very difficult. I was lucky though. I had a wonderful, wonderful roommate, a guy by the name of Chris Benoit, who luckily he and I got along really well. We were roommates for almost a year. Spent a lot of time going back and forth to Japan, and Chris and I ended up being friends for life after that. I lost touch with him in the later years after I left the business. He and I lost touch with each other. But when I was in Atlanta, when I was in WCW, Chris and I ended up being very good friends. But I will tell you, man, I've done a lot of I was, like I said, I wrestled for Iowa State University. I wrestled for one of the toughest junior college wrestling schools in the nation, a school called North Idaho College, who has over 10 national championships under their belt in the state of Idaho. Mm-hmm. And I thought I had experienced, hard physical exertion, but I'm here to tell you what New Japan, what Chris and I threw, made everything else I'd ever done in my life pale by comparison. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I'm here to tell you it was tough, and I mean really tough.
I bet. Wow. So you were in the WWF. You were known a lot for carrying around that big WWF logo guitar. So I asked you this previously, but for everybody else, a lot of people may also want to know is, do you still have that guitar in your personal collection, or what do you think may have happened to it? And was that personally yours to begin with, or was it something that they gave to you?
Well, I always believed it was mine. I was the one that was demanded to carry it around everywhere I went, so I carried it with me. I played it in the ring. I was the one who ordered it. I was the one who paid for it. I was the one, so even though, it was a WWF logo, I still was the one that was burdened was responsible for it. I don't have it. I'm glad I don't have it, to be honest with you. It can never be played publicly again. So whoever does have it, they can't ever display it publicly. It's only worth something. The funny part about it is it's only worth something because it was attached to me, and because my character didn't get over that big, didn't get over at all. As a result of that, the guitar doesn't really mean that much. If, however, this, things can change. I have other things coming up in my life still that could change the value of that guitar. But the truth of the matter is no one can ever display it. Nobody can ever use it publicly because it's the WWF logo, which they themselves lost in a legal court battle at the World Wildlife Foundation. So, no, I don't have it. I really believe with all my heart that Vince found it, and I really believe it's in a vault in Titan Tower somewhere.
Yeah. They should make a show where, like a WWE show where they like bring back old accessories and like gear. I think they had a show where they had actually like wrestlers' old gear, but like they should have like included like accessories and like brought it back and like brought the wrestler on the show to like talk about it and talk about like their career within it.
I'm still blackballed in the WWF for whatever reason, WWE for whatever reason. I have never, no one has ever contacted me from the WWE since I left the last show I was at in Switzerland, in Geneva, Switzerland, in 1996, I believe, 95, it was 95. I know exactly when it was. It was in like November of 95 when the last show I played at in Geneva, Switzerland, or Zurich, I think it was. That was no one, and I mean no one, has ever contacted me from the WWE ever again. So I'm still on the blacklist because of the movie that I shot.
Wow, that's upsetting.
Such is life.
I think you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
There's a lot of people in the WWE that would laugh at you directly in your face for that, because they would say, for what? But you know what? It's okay. I'm one of those guys that, I'm happy with where I'm at, because the one thing that I would never allow anybody to take away from me is my own personal happiness, because I'm just not going to do that. And I wake up every day of my life and thank the good Lord that I'm still here, because I am beat to shit. Like almost all other wrestlers. No, not almost. Any wrestler who spent any longevity in the wrestling business is beat to shit. And I'm one of those guys. And the fact that I'm here to do interviews with guys like you, Blake, and, just to be a part of, to still be a voice that somebody's still interested in hearing what I have to say, I'm thankful beyond reproach for that. And I count my lucky stars every day for being the lucky man that I am, that I'm still here and I can still tell these stories.
Definitely. So you mentioned being like really good friends and really close to Chris Benoit, and then you later distanced yourself from him, and like it kind of went different ways after you were done with the business and the companies. What was your reaction to the whole incident, if you don't mind sharing that, after being really close with him for so long?
Oh, it broke my heart. I still, it's super difficult for me to talk about it now, because I have such fond memories of Chris Benoit. I mean, I could tell you story after story after story, the things that Chris did for me, the times we shared together. I still have cassette tapes of mixes we made when we were in Japan together. And,
Wow.
It's just one of those things that every moment of my life, I think about Chris all the time. And what's really sad is that he's defined, and rightfully so. I don't want to say anything except that what he did was atrocious and horrible, but it was a disease that had eaten his brain. His logic center in his brain had been eaten by CTE. His brain was studied by MIT. His father could not understand how his son could do something like this, and as a result of that, he investigated. And when they investigated Chris's brain, he had one of the worst cases of CTE they had ever seen. So even the logic center in his brain had started to erode. And I'm sure Chris was just absolutely beside himself trying to understand why he had these feelings that he was having. And he was going through what he was going through. People tried to blame it on roid rage. It wasn't roid rage. It was CTE. And now we know what CTE does to people. The NFL has finally, look at what it took for the NFL to finally admit how bad CTE is and what it did to some of their players. I mean, some of the greats. I mean, Aaron Hernandez, Junior Seau. The list goes on. I know there's a couple of others that were in that CTE cost them their lives. And Chris is one of those guys. And hopefully someday the world can forgive Chris for what he did, because I honestly believe in my heart that it was something that he had no control over in the end.
Definitely.
I'll probably get a lot of shit for saying that no, that's not true or whatever, but I think anybody who would have bothered to do any research and truly understand what CTE is and what it does to human beings would agree with me.
Yeah. And you being so close to him for a very long time, I mean, you knew what he was like as a person too. I mean,
I did.
So, yeah.
He was a good man. For a long time, I had some recordings on my answering machine. He was so funny. He would come and stay with me when I lived in Atlanta. In fact, I'd given him a key. He could just come to my apartment whenever he wanted to when we were in Atlanta. And it was so funny because the way I knew he was coming, he would never go, "Hey, Max, it's Chris. I'm going to be in Atlanta on Friday." He would call me and he would play a piece of one of the mixtapes he and I had made together. And the only other person that knew what it was me. So he would play because what I would do is I would take a song and then I would take a line from one of our favorite movies at the time to take lines from was RoboCop. And so I would take a great song, like a Cinderella song, and then I would have a line from RoboCop and then the next song by Kiss or whatever. And I would use that to segue into the next song. And so Chris would call me and play one of those little segments that only I would know what it was. And I would know he was coming to town. But he would never call me and go, "Hey, Max, I'm coming to town. Can you mind if like I said, I just gave him a key. And he would call me and leave that musical message for me. and I will tell you this. When I left the stage after the national anthem at Asheville, North Carolina, there were two people standing at the stage at the edge of the curtain. When I walked through the curtain, there were two people. One of them I had never met before. And the first one was Chris Benoit. And Chris the tears were pouring down his cheeks. He hugged me and he goes, "Oh my God, Max, that was so awesome." And you know who was standing behind him, crying like a baby? Harley Race. And Harley Race walked up and he shook my hand in the most gentle way, because he was known for muscle grip. I mean, he had a vice grip handshake. He never treated me that way. He never shook my hand like that. When I walked up to him and he looked me in the eyes and the tears were pouring down his cheeks and he looked at me, and you know what he said? "Oh my God, you can really play." And He and I were friends. He tried so hard to get Eric Bischoff to give me and Vader a run together, and even Harley couldn't get Bischoff to let me and Vader have a run.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just great. From Harley Race.
That's one of those real fond memories in my life, I got to tell you.
Definitely one that to cherish for a long time.
Oh, and I do. I really do. Yeah. I'm very lucky.
So, mentioning that you got to work earlier for CWA in Tennessee, you got to go against one of the greats, Jerry Lawler, during your time there. What was it like getting to go against him, and not just go against him, but you actually beat him for the CWA Heavyweight Championship? How did that moment feel for you?
You know, it was my first territory after Japan, and it was amazing. I mean, again, I look back at that. It was incredibly difficult. I will tell you, there was no money. The business was in the shitter. There was no money to be made. We were driving 3,000 miles a week in our own cars and putting miles on our own cars and living, hand to fist. And it was literally, and it was tough. But I look back at that, and that's another one of those, chapters in my book. Well, there'll be more than one chapter in my book that I have some amazing, amazing stories of. And working against Lawler is one of those, he's such a great teacher. And all the conventions of Lawler and getting to know them and being a part of wrestling in the Mid-South Coliseum and getting to meet the people that I got to meet. And like I got to meet Sputnik Monroe before he died. And, that guy, he was an impressive human being. And I will never forget the incredible people that I got to work with there. And I was really lucky. And Jerry Lawler, I love Lawler. I don't know if he feels the same way about me. It's funny, every time I see him, he just stands and looks at me and points and laughs. So I don't quite know what that means. But I love Jerry, and I have nothing but fond memories of Lawler. And I've got some, like I said, I've got some really great stories from Memphis that I will tell in the book. And like I said, you'll have to have me back on. I will tell you just briefly. I'm not going to go into the whole story now because it would take me too long to tell it and do it justice. But I chased a mugger down through the streets of Memphis and got the purse back of the woman he stole, her purse and all of her money. And I chased him through the streets and tracked him down and caught him. And it's just one of those moments in my life that, how do you forget that, right? But remember that, like I said, when the book comes out and then you've read the whole story, you can have me back on and we'll talk about those stories.
Definitely. That'll definitely be in my head, and I'll definitely have to ask you about that after the book. So, could you share the story of you applying for a job called Word Perfect, but then not too long after you got a call from one of your best friends, Chris Benoit, to do a wrestling tour in Germany, and then you said yes to the offer instead of the job you actually applied for?
Well, it's so funny because my wife at the time, my first wife, she did not want me to go back into wrestling for a lot of reasons, of which I'll explain in my book. But she did not want me to go back into the wrestling business. But I was a wrestler, and it's not just something that you dismiss and you walk away from. And so I had really started to gain some traction. There was a company called Word Perfect, Word Perfect was the original creator of word processing software. They made a word processing software originally, and where they messed up is they didn't believe in Windows. They believed in MS-DOS. And we all know where that ended up. So they didn't support Microsoft. They supported MS-DOS. And as a result of that, Microsoft said, all right, fuck you. Watch what we'll do. We'll build our own word processing software and we'll shut you out. And now if you say Word Perfect to somebody, they'll look at you and go, you mean Word? And the answer is no. Word Perfect ended up being, they actually still sold Word Perfect. They still sold it for $2 billion when it sold the word processing software. But I had finally made my way to the point where I had an interview with the guy who was in charge of the AV department at Word Perfect. And I'd gone and interviewed for him, and I knew I knew I was going to get the job there. And right after I interviewed with him, I got a call from Otto. Well, I got a call first from Chris. And Chris said, he goes, Max, what are you doing? I go, dude, I can't find a job. Every territory I would get booked in would get canceled. And I said, I can't go do Canada, Chris. I can't. Stu Hart had called me and wanted me to come to Canada because I was a big salty bastard. You know, he wanted me to go up there and do some shooting, go up there and stretch a couple of fucking guys. And I said, Stu, I'm sorry, man. I have so much respect for you, but I said, I have a wife and kids, and I'm trying to hold it together. I can't come to Canada and starve. I can't. And I couldn't get a job anywhere after the CWA. In fact, I started my own wrestling territory in hopes that maybe I could make a little bit of money running my own wrestling territory. And we did good. We had some fun, but it didn't work out. And one day I got a call from Chris right after I'd done this interview, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, can't find a job. He said, I got you a job. A guy named Otto Bonds is going to call you back from Germany. And I said, okay. He said, I promise you, stick by the phone. He's going to call you right back. And I said, all right. And I hung up, and within 5 minutes, the phone rang, and it was Otto. And God damn it, I hear you're a big old shooter from America. I want you to come to Germany. I have a name for you already. Will you come to Germany and then to Austria? I want you to be a wrestler for me. And I said, I would love to. And so he said, I send you the contract immediately and you come within the next 2 weeks. And I said, okay. So I hung the phone up and I went to my ex-wife and I said to her, she was still my wife at the time, and I said to her, whichever contract shows up first, whoever calls me first, I said, I promise you, if Word Perfect gets a hold of me before Otto Bonds does, I'll go work for Word Perfect. The contract for Otto Bonds showed up 2 days later. And 3 days later, Word Perfect called me and offered me the job. So obviously, yeah, I took the contract and I went to Germany.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's kind of the whole story in a nutshell.
Awesome. How did the whole Maxx Payne persona come about, and what is some of like the background behind the character?
You know, from the time I was a kid, I hated my name. My name's Daryl Peterson. I hated it. Hated it. Hated the name Daryl. And I remember this one time I went to see a movie when I was a kid. I think it came out in 1968 or 1969. There was a movie that came out called The Green Beret with John Wayne in it. And I remember I went to see this movie probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 times because I'm a huge, that's the other thing my mother did for me is she loved movies and motion pictures. And so she loved the idea of me being an actor and me working in the motion picture and being an actor on stage or whatever.
Yeah.
And so she would, as a babysitter, she'd give me $2, take me down to the Groovy Grove, which was the Grove Theater was the name of the little theater in my hometown of Pleasant Grove, Utah. And she'd drop me off there at, you know, the first matinee started at like 3 o'clock, and I'd sit there sometimes if I really liked the movie, I'd sit there until the last movie at 11 o'clock at night and watch them over and over and over again. And so at this particular time, the movie The Green Beret had just come out, and I can't have been much more than 9 or 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home after the movie, and I remember we had this 69 Lincoln Continental with suicide doors. It was black. Looked like a presidential limousine. It was amazing. And we're driving home, and I'm playing with the window, rolling the window up and down, and I said to my mother, I said, does John Wayne go to the bathroom? She went, what? And she laughed, and she realized what I was asking, because here you're sitting in front of a screen where, you know, this guy's, 40 feet tall sitting in front of me, and in the Green Beret, he was bulletproof, and she proceeds to say, tell me the truth about John Wayne. And she said, no, his real name is actually Marion Michael Morrison. She knew a lot about John Wayne because she loved him. She said he was born in a little town called Winterset, Iowa. And she said he pulls his pants on every day, just like your dad does. And he goes to the bathroom, just like your dad and I do. So she explained all of that to me and explained to me that the name he had was a stage name. And probably 2 weeks after that, she had a bunch of magazines like People and Hollywood Insider. And I took those magazines and I cut all my favorite actors out and I made a collage, especially of like Raquel Welch and Shirley Jones and all the women that I thought was hot in Hollywood, all the guys that were my favorite actors. And I made this big collage. And I went to her and I showed her this collage and I said to her, I hate my name. And she was so brokenhearted. I worked so hard to give you such a unique name. How can you hate your name? I said, I don't know. I just do. And she goes, well, what would you call yourself if you were going to change your name? And I said, I don't know. But when I figure it out, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
And as the wrestling business, as I started to learn the wrestling business, and this is actually a very deep story, and there's a lot more to it, but I'm just going to give you the fluff over right now because, again, to tell you all of the intimate details of it would take me quite a long time to do it. I said to her, I'll figure it out. And as I started to build my character, I knew I wanted my last name to be Payne, and originally I was going to be Lucifer Payne. I wanted I was going to use the name Lucifer because I wanted to be a heel. I knew I wanted to be a heel in the wrestling business right from the get-go. I didn't want to wear no fucking polyester pink tights and pink patent leather boots like Flair did. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to wear black. I wanted to wear my hair black, number one. I wanted, and it took me a long time to develop that character. In fact, in Germany, Otto Wanz would not let me be who I wanted to be, which is I wanted to be Maxx Payne there. He wouldn't let me be that. He wanted me to be Buffalo Pedersen. So the first season I was there, I was Buffalo Pedersen. And then the next season, when the whole guitar thing manifested itself, I said, I want to be, there was a commercial campaign going on by Coca-Cola at the time called Max Headroom. And I loved Max Headroom. And I was watching Max Headroom one night, and I'd already, like I said, I already sort of chose Lucifer Payne. It hit me. Maxx Payne was the name that I really wanted to use. And that's when it developed, the whole character developed. And that's when I chose it, and I started to use it. Much to the chagrin of everybody around me, the promoters around me, like New Japan, would not let me use Maxx Payne. They did not want anything to do with Maxx Payne. And in the end, even Otto Wanz wouldn't let me be Maxx Payne. I was Heavy Metal Buffalo is what I transitioned to the second year that I was in Germany. And there's actually T-shirts out there. I think I still have one that says Heavy Metal Buffalo on it. And then I made some Maxx Payne T-shirts while I was there. And like I said, I just knew that I wanted to be that character. And I was sitting in Japan in a hotel lobby with Tom Richard. And I said, I'm going to go home from Japan. And I said, I'm not going to stop until I've learned how to play the guitar to the point where I can play it in the ring. I told Tom Pritchard that in that hotel. That day, I did just that. I went home and created the Maxx Payne character. And I spent the rest of my days until it was taken from me at the WWF, developing the Maxx Payne character. And so that's really how it came to be. And here's the reason I brought up the whole John Wayne story. I went through a lawsuit over my name. It was taken from me. And when I went through that lawsuit, I had to do a deposition. And in the middle of that deposition, I told the story about the John Wayne and the Green Beret and all of that, and it hit me on the spot. John Wayne, Maxx Payne. How close the two ended up being to each other. And I had done it completely subconsciously. It just ended up being almost that same kind of name analogy. I mean, I even spelled my name Payne. Not with no, I didn't do that because of the way John Wayne spelled his name. Every logic would have said I spelled my name Pain. But I wanted people to believe that my name really was Maxx Payne. And so I spelled it Yne. And that's really the beginning and the origin of Maxx Payne.
Wow. Great story. So what was it like going against somebody like Giant Haystacks, and then you defeated him for the CWA Intercontinental Heavyweight title?
It's the wrestling business. In the end, all that matters is that the people went home happy that night. And, by then, in fairness, and anybody that was there, if they tell you different, they're lying. But by then, we were filling the tent in Hanover, Germany, and that tent hadn't been filled in a long time, because when I played my guitar, the German wrestling fans loved it. I mean, they just loved it. They would come out and watch me play, and we would have so much fun. And I'd play Kiss songs. I'd play Knocking on Heaven's Door, and then I'd play I'd written a drum track of the first song I ever wrote called WFO, which stands for Wide Fucking Open. And I played that song, and the wrestling fans they just loved it. And so we did really, really well. And so that night is one of those nights, again, where just to go out there and watch the wrestling fans, enjoy themselves, and to pop over what you're doing. In the end, that's all that matters. And Haystacks was very gracious with me. And it was certainly not a barn burner of a match. But the crowd in the end loved it, and I won the CWA title. And in the end, it did what we wanted it to, was get the people on their feet, and we had a great night. So it was awesome.
Definitely. Somebody wanted me to ask you is if you had any Owen Hart stories.
Well, I do have a profound Owen Hart story. Probably the most profound one is, when I went on my last tour with the WWF, they weren't going to allow me to play. I realized that I carried my guitar to Europe for nothing, because the Clique had decided I wasn't going to play the guitar. So they had no intentions of letting me go in the ring and play the guitar on what was called the metal tour or something. The heavy metal tour, Full Metal Tour is what it was called. And the whole point of that tour was, I was going to go play, and it was going to be like, that was the reason why it was called the Full Metal Tour, is I was going to play heavy metal every night, and it was going to be a lot of fun. But by then, the powers that be in the Clique had really shut me completely down. So we're on the bus. We go to the dressing room that night and getting ready to wrestle in one of the towns in Germany. And Owen and Radford, Louis Muccioli, Louis Piccoli, were having a fight, spraying cologne on each other. And Owen Hart hid around the corner. And when Louis walked around the corner, he sprayed cologne on Louis, and it hit him right in the eyes. And Louis was allergic to that cologne. And literally within 15 minutes, his eyes were completely swollen shut. He could not see at all. We had to lead him to the bus. He was miserable. And so Tony Gurria came to me that night, and he said, "Okay, we're gonna do a battle royal tonight, and he said, you know, here's what's going on, and here's who's going over, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, and I looked at Tony and I said, Tony, I said, why did I bring my guitar if you guys aren't going to let me play it? I said, you do realize that you have a wrestler that can give you 15 minutes without an opponent. And he kind of looked at me and he went, who? And I'm like, I can go out and play the guitar for 15 minutes, Tony. I said, no problem. I go out there, I have 2 songs. And I said, I'll go out there and free jam for 5 minutes. And I said, I'll play my songs. And I said, it'll be your opening match without there being a match. And he said, just a minute. I'm going to go call Vince on the phone. Let me find out if we can do that. And had Owen Hart not sprayed Louis in the eyes that night with that cologne, I would have never got to prove to the world that the German audiences, they flipped out. It was so amazing. Every performance I played, the crowd, I was first out every night, and the crowd was on their feet chanting Zugaben and, you know, do it again. And it was just so amazing and so much fun. And had Owen, and I don't mean this in a bad way, not accidentally hurt Louis by spraying that cologne in his eyes, I would have never got to manifest. The whole reason I took my video camera with me on that tour was so that I could show the world and prove to the world that what I was doing in the ring, fans were popping them. And I still have video proof of it to this day.
Wow. Is there ever a chance we could see you do one more match, a retirement match?
No. I've lost 2 toes from diabetes. I have no anterior cruciate in either one of my knees. I have a horrible, my sacrum, all of the portals in my sacrum are closing and causing numbness in my legs. I have horrible osteophytes in my back, all the way from the top of my neck all the way down to my sacrum. I have no rotator cuffs in my shoulders. I'm deaf in one ear. I'm going blind. You know, I'm never getting in the ring again. There's no amount of, it just, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And I don't want to, you know. I had my, when I left the wrestling ring in 1996, when I left Germany for the last time, I said, that's it. I'm never putting on my wrestling boots again. And I never have.
Yeah, definitely. Understandable, for sure. What about your hair? What made you want to chop off your hair, and when did you decide to?
I just chopped it off a couple of months ago. I just, you know, I do that. I go through different stages in my life. I could grow it back. I just decided, I've had enough of it for a while now. So chopped it off. And I don't know if I'll ever grow it back again. You know, it's much cooler. It's nicer. I'm older. I like wearing hats. You know, it's easier to wear hats with my hair short, you know, so I'll probably just wear hats the rest of I don't know though. I can't say that definitively, but as of right now, I have no intentions of growing my hair back.
Right. Are there any ribs that anyone has played on you during your time in WWF WCW or New Japan that you're willing to share, or if not on you, or like any time that you took part or witnessed?
Oh, I'm pretty famous for pulling ribs on people. So, you know, I got a few eyebrows in my day. I like shaving people's eyebrows. You know, that was one of my favorite things to do because it's pretty harmless, you know. And so, you know, I shaved a few eyebrows, and you know, I was involved in a few ribs, and you know, there's a few stories out there that are pretty amazing. Again, there'll be a couple of them in the book. There was an incident called the B Bus that was it's pretty famous in the wrestling business. It would take too much time to tell you that right now. Again, I need to write it and officially get it down on paper and sort of go through what I remember about that night. And but yeah, I was around a lot of ribs. The boys are ribbers, and that's just the nature of the beast. So that's a part of the business. It's always a lot of fun.
Definitely. A big thing about wrestling is having the ribs and stuff. I mean, a lot of things to remember about that.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah. Who are some of your favorite people to usually travel with during your time in the wrestling business? Who are some of like your travel buddies?
Mick Foley was probably my favorite travel partner. I have to confess, I loved traveling with Mick, and he and I was always so brokenhearted that Mick and I's relationship fell apart. It crushed me, and at levels that I can't even begin to tell you. I loved Mick. I loved his family. I loved his children. I got to meet. I was privileged to really get to know Mick. And really, through no fault of my own, our relationship fell apart. And I've always felt horrible about that. And I've always wanted Mick to know that I wished I understood a little better why we never figured out how to have a relationship after that, because I always thought we were so good in the ring and doing interviews together. And Mick was just somebody that I love the guy, I still do. And I think the world of him. And despite the things that have happened in our relationship, I have no problems with Mick, and I love him dearly.
Definitely. Yeah, he's a great guy. I got to meet him at WrestleCon, and then I also had him on my podcast in the past. So he was one great guy. Yeah.
He's a good guest. I know that.
Mm-hmm. I had him on with Yerpel. I don't know if you know who Yerpel the Clown was.
I don't know who that is.
It was a clown persona that basically she was in WWF for a while, and she did some personas or some like storylines with Mick Foley, like the one hospital storyline where Vince McMahon was in the hospital and Mick Foley came in, and that's when Yerpel debuted and they attacked him.
Yeah, I really fell away from the business for years. I didn't follow any of the business for a lot of years. I felt like I needed to move on, and so I did.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we've talked about this a little bit, where you had a feud with Johnny B. Bad, Mark Merrow, and there was at Clash of Champions at a WCW show, you had the feud with him where you shot him in the face with a confetti gun, which led to him wearing a mask. What was it like getting to do that storyline with him?
Oh, it was great. That was it. I remember rehearsing, shooting him with the Bad Blaster and how to make it look on angle and to make it look good, and everything we did, and we worked really, really hard to pull that off. And it was like I said. I think I said this earlier in the interview. It was a pleasure working with Johnny. Mark ended up introducing me to my manager, who ended up who helped me. She didn't really help me that much, but I had an intermediate manager who tried to help me with my musical career. And because of Mark, I met her, and she managed my career for a little while. And it was all because of Mark. Mark was a very generous guy, and he was a sweetheart. He was fun to work with, and I have nothing but fond memories of Mark.
Definitely. You also had a great feud with Bob Backlund in WWF. what was it like getting to work with him? And then you also got to smash a guitar over him, which was another big thing that you did.
Working with Bob was a pleasure. It again, it just didn't fit. It didn't fit me at the time, and I tried so hard to pull that character off, and I just couldn't do it because my heart wasn't in it. But working with Bob was the consummate professional, and I really enjoyed working with him. And I saw him not too long ago. Has he passed?
No, but I heard that he's getting dementia and that he's not doing anything.
He didn't remember me at all. So, I talked to him briefly, and I got along good with Bob, though. It was a pleasure working with him, and it was a night off working with Bob Backlund. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sad to see what's happening to him. I mean, he was great.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the way life is, I'm afraid. We all get old.
Yeah. If you don't mind sharing, what were your thoughts on the Vince McMahon scandal thing that went around not too long ago?
Oh, it's funny because I don't believe anything. I am the biggest. The wrestling business is a work. So if it's a work, where does reality and non-reality? I just to convince people of your heeldom. I'm always suspect, no matter what the court documents say. Honestly, I'm a very huge skeptic of anything to do with the wrestling business that way, because that's what the wrestling business does. And if you want, what's really amazing is now I can talk like this, and anybody can talk like this, because the WWE just released Unreal, and they have completely and utterly exposed every aspect of the business. And I mean every aspect. The only secrets they keep are the secrets going in to the big events, so that people aren't disappointed that they already know what the finishes are going to be. And so, I just don't. I think that wrestling was one of those things that I've always said and will always say and always believed, that it's a work. And that's why it's so amazing. And that's why people love it, because they give you what you want. The whole point in what wrestling does for you is give you the baby face and the heel. And in the end, generally speaking, the baby face wins because they were pure at heart and they fought with an athlete's vengeance and vigor, and they weren't willing to cheat or do anything wrong to achieve a victory. Why the heel does what? Cheats and is willing to do anything to accomplish their goal. And that's why we love wrestling. It is the ultimate place to tell a story. And that's why I never believe anything I read about the wrestling business, unless it's somebody who's died, and then you pretty much don't have a choice when it comes to that. But but everything else, my first instinct on everything is it's a work first. Everything else follows after that.
Right. When you got released from WWF, there was a moment that you wanted to go work a backstage job like an announcer in WCW. Was that true? And if you could share that story.
Like I said, I was so blackballed by then that I guess they didn't need a guy with, a television. It wasn't that they didn't need me. It's that, like I said, Kevin Nash hated me. Scott Hall hated me. Shawn Michaels hated me. Those guys just wanted nothing to do with me at all. And, when somebody has that kind of a vendetta out against you, they strip me of Maxx Payne. They strip me of all the things that I truly wanted to be and all the things I wanted to do with my character, and put me in a pair of tie-dyed, it made me look like a fat hippie instead of, you know, the metal guy that I wanted to be. I wasn't a fat hippie. I didn't want to play 60s rock. I wanted to play metal. I wanted to befriend bands like Metallica and Korn and, you know, Black Sabbath and all the heavy metal that I'd grown up with, Alice Cooper, all the people that eventually, you know, donned that world. And, you know, so, you know, it just was the nature of the beast.
Well, yeah.
They wanted nothing to do with me. And so therefore I who would I contact? I have heard Bruce Pritchard talk about going, yeah, we didn't understand Maxx, you know, he didn't want to wrestle anymore. Well, I didn't want to wrestle anymore because I wanted to explore the musical side of my life, as well as the fact I had a degree in television and film. I'd worked in television now between WCW and WWE. I had 10 years of television experience just working in television for, you know, in wrestling alone.
Yeah.
I worked in a commercial television station for 3 years when I was in Iowa. I went to Los Angeles and worked on television shows. I mean, so everything I wanted to do was work in television. And no one ever gave me a call and said, God, man, you ever thought about coming and producing music with us? Or because I have what I would consider a doctor's degree in audio engineering. I taught myself how to be an audio engineer. I can record anything in Pro Tools. I taught myself all about audio Scientology, science, and the science of audio, of audiology. And, you know, I like I said, again, for whatever reason, I burned too many bridges with the movie that I shot and the other things that I'd done that nobody wanted anything to do with me. And so therefore, that's where I ended up. I you know, like I said, I never got another phone call from the World Wrestling Federation after the end of the tour, after the end of the Full Metal tour. So, you know, what do I do at that point, right?
Yeah.
If somebody has no interest in working with you, it's just not who I am. I'm not gonna beat you over the head with it, you know. Just to have a job. I'll go out and do something else in the world, and I did. I had plenty of other opportunities in my life after that.
For sure, definitely. Was there ever any offers for you to work for ECW?
No. Nope. Paulie never called me, and I always really thought he would, to be honest with you. But again, I don't understand. Like I said, I had heat obviously with those people, and as a result of that, I just never had an opportunity after that to work again in the business.
Yeah. Was there ever a time you wanted to do your own theme song, but it got like shut down or anything like that?
I did my own theme. No, I did it, and they wouldn't let me use it. The only people that let me use it was the WCW. Actually, when I first went into WCW, I played my theme song a cappella standing on this big wind machine. It was called Norma Jean's Blues, or WFO is what it had in subtitle or in parentheses, because that was the name of the song that I'd written. I wanted to write all my own theme music, and Jim Johnston, who was the WWF music writer, would not allow me in any way, shape, or form to have anything to do with my own music. That was the other thing that was so difficult for me, is when I first performed for Vince was into it, and then Vince went out into the world and started talking to all these other people, and they all shut him down when it came to me. And as a result of that, we just never saw eye to eye ever again. And that always just broke my heart. And then they put me in Madison Square Garden in front of 20,000 people. with a system that I couldn't have played in a bar of 200 people with, and I begged Vince not to put me out in Madison Square Garden. And because I couldn't hear myself play, it was a mess, an absolute mess. And I begged Vince, please don't put me out there in front of this crowd without professionals doing this the right way. Put me out there with the right kind of guys, with the right kind of audio, so I can hear. I needed a rock stage to play this so that the people would love it. Instead, they put me out there with a microphone in front of a Marshall amplifier, and I couldn't. When the people started screaming and cheering, I couldn't hear myself, and I got booed off the stage, and it broke my heart. To this day, it's one of those things that just breaks my heart, because I begged Vince not to do that to me. But at the time, they wanted, like I said, the clique wanted to see me fail so badly that they went out of their way to make sure that everything I did was basically sabotaged. And that's okay. I don't hold any animosity towards that. It just happens to be a fact. Because I believe that when wrestling fans, if they would have let me be the Maxx Payne character that I truly wanted to be, if Vince would have supported that the way he supported guys like The Undertaker and, Triple H and Steve Austin, if he would have given me that kind of consideration with a gimmick that was so unique, nobody else did it, or to be honest with you, has done it to date. There's other guys, don't get me wrong, that have rock careers. I mean, obviously, oh my gosh, the guy who does Dark Side of the Ring, it's right on the tip of my tongue. I'm having a brain fart.
Who does?
Chris Jericho.
Oh, yeah. Chris
Jericho. Mm-hmm. There's been other guys.
Yeah.
But he didn't go to the ring playing his guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else did that. And that was the part that I always believed was cool. And I always thought, I always wanted to be kind of the Paul Schaefer of the WWF, but Jim Johnston wasn't going to have that. He wasn't going to let me shine musically because he was afraid that would take away from him. And I never understood that. And I hated the sound they gave me with the Man Mountain Rock. It wasn't my sound. It wasn't my guitar playing. Everything about it was done the wrong way. And if we would have done it, that's one of those moments. There is a time that I didn't say no. And that's when I should have said, no, I'm not going to do it that way. And if you want me to really do it, then you're going to help me to do it. Hire the right people and do it the right way. But there was so many things going on behind the scenes that fell apart. It would take me another 5 hours to tell you all the things, which included the rock star Steve Miller. Steve Miller was an absolute integral part of what I was going to do at WrestleMania. And at the last minute, he promised me he was going to do that. In fact, Steve Miller, the rock star legend, Steve Miller, is who cost me my career in the WWF. So another story will be in the book.
Wow. So there was also a time in your life where you had a hard time with your drug habits during your time in WWF and just wrestling in general, which was one of the reasons for your release. If you don't mind, could you share your recovery story of recovering from that and where you are now with that?
That's one of those things. I look back and I got to be honest with you, man. There's a lot of guys. In fact, everybody I ran with, we were all in the same boat when it came to drug use, man. At the time, it was, we all were addicted to painkillers and somas and Valium and, anything we could get, our sleeping pills, anything we could get our hands on, because when you're on the road 300 days a year and you get up as beat up as you get in the wrestling. I've heard rock stars, especially lately, and I got to tell you, this is something that really bothers me. I've heard a lot of rock stars talk about how similar the rock and roll lifestyle is to the wrestler lifestyle of getting in a car and driving around and going to town. And I always say this. I always say to anybody who wants to compare rock and roll to wrestling, fair enough analogy, but before the rock star gets on the bus after he gets done playing his gig at night, before you get on the bus, stand in the parking lot and throw yourself onto your back 10 times. And then get on the bus every night after throwing yourself on your back, after playing a show, and then throw yourself on your back 10 times, and then get on the bus, and then compare yourself to being a wrestler. That's the difference. Rock stars weren't in pain because they were physically beat to shit. Rock stars were in pain because they'd gone out there. They not saying they didn't work hard, but they certainly weren't feeling what wrestlers feel when they left arena. Jesse said it best. I never left the arena that I wasn't in pain. And that is absolutely the truth. Wrestlers, like football players, like basketball players, we learned to work hurt. And wrestling is different than basketball. It's different than football. It's different than baseball. Those guys work every other couple of nights, every 3 nights, whatever. And then they have a season. They play 80 games. They play 16 games. They play, 18 games with the Super Bowl, 19 games or 20 games, whatever it is. Not taking anything away from them. They're football players. Wrestlers do that back in those days. Wrestlers were doing that 6, 7, sometimes twice on weekends, on Saturdays and Sunday, wrestling every day of the week. And it is a battle. And I don't care who the fuck you are. When you go out there and you put your body through that, you need something to help you get through that, because without it, I honestly, I don't know how anybody could make it through that. And I battled with addiction. I still battle with it today. I will be an addict my whole life. There's no way around it. I'm just not the level of addict that I was then. I'm in a much more controlled environment now. I live a completely different kind of lifestyle. And I managed to make it through those times of indulgency where by all reason of sanity, I should have been dead, like so many of my other friends. And I've written that's the part about what I did and the music that I wrote, which is also going to come out in the near future. I wrote songs about what it felt like to be a wrestler. I wrote songs called Falling Down, for a living. And the words of falling down is what I do for a living. Falling down is what I do for you. Falling down, the spirit's all in the giving. There's only one problem with falling down. It seems like getting up is all I do. And as a wrestler, I really believe that would. I always believed my wrestling friends would be the biggest fans of my music because it spoke directly to their souls. Unfortunately, it didn't make it out. I do have confidence, though, that my music is still going to make it out there, because I have some other projects coming down the line that I hope that will lend themselves to getting my music out there.
Definitely. That would be great for that to go out and finally hear what you have.
You can hear a couple of my songs. They're actually on the Payne layer. There's 2 songs on there. I believe it's Falling Down, and it might be, I think the other song that I have on there is not Falling Down, is a song called That Song. And it's basically a ballad written about life on the road as a wrestler. It's my turn the page, if you will. It's completely summarized the way I felt about what I was dealing with in the business. And the name of my band was Living Insanity. And when you're a wrestler, I used to always say, is living insanity 3 words or 2 words? And when you're a wrestler, you measure that every day.
Yeah, definitely. Then there also some time during your time in your WWF, there was a time where you were planning on releasing a documentary later, which captured like many behind the scenes things that went on.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be called "The Thing That Should Not Be" or "The Real Maxx Payne." What was the reason for it not being released and all that?
All I can say right now, Blake, is stay tuned.
All right.
It's not. I really I can't say much right now. I just stay tuned. It's not over. So, and I don't care who you are and what kind of wrestling. If you're a wrestling fan, if I can pull off what I want to pull off, there's no wrestling fan that won't want to see this. That's for sure.
All right. Then also in July of 2003, there was a Maxx Payne lawsuit. Could you share the story about that and all what eventually happened?
So when I left the wrestling business, the first thing I did was join with an acting agency in Salt Lake City, Utah called McCarty Acting Agency. And the very first gig I got with McCarty Acting Agency was as a voiceover talent for a video game called Rogue Trip. And it was the third game in a sequence of games called Twisted Metal. It was the final game for the Twisted Metal series, and it was called Rogue Trip. And they hired me to be a guy named, if I'm not mistaken, his name was Hatchet Jack. I have the videos actually, and I think they're on my website. I think they're on the Payne Lair on my YouTube. So go check it out. I think you'll have a lot of fun, Blake. You really will. In fact, you go scam the gems that are on my YouTube channel. You're gonna have a lot of fun. It's called
I definitely will.
Payne Lair. The Payne Lair is all one word. PAYNELAIR. Go and check it out. Go listen to the songs. Go listen to the music, and you'll see there's a. But anyway, so I went to work for the very first gig when I left the wrestling business. And this guy came up to me and he asked me if I had trademarked my name. And I said, well, why would I need to trademark my name? I've been on national television I was on national television for 2 years as Maxx Payne. I own the character. Vince even acknowledged my Maxx Payne character in my WWF contract. And I said, why would I need to do that? And he said, well, it might just be a wise idea. And he did it in a very private way. And then I got a phone call from this guy named Scott Miller, who worked for a company called Rockstar Games, and asked me if I wanted to sell my name. And I said, no, I intend on using it the rest of my life. And I can't talk about any of the details of it, but when the video game Maxx Payne came out, there's direct ties to the guys I'd worked for at a company called Single Track, who were the people that recorded my voice and all of my voicings. And I'd given them a dossier with all of my name and all of the things I'd done as a wrestler. And then the rest is history. Before we went to court, they settled with me out of court, and I can't talk about any of the details of it, but they settled with me, and it wasn't a nuisance lawsuit. So that much I can say. And I still have the right to use Maxx Payne as an author, as an actor, as a guy who was Maxx Payne. They did leave me rights in the NDA I signed with them. So I still have a tremendous amount of rights to use the name Maxx Payne. So
that's good.
I'm planning on taking advantage of that.
Of course, yeah. The name that made your career successful. I mean,
absolutely, and something I created. It is
yes.
my creation. It's a character I'm proud of. It is a character I've carried with me, and quite frankly, I still go by Maxx today. I've never gone by Daryl, and I don't like to go by Daryl. I've never felt like a Daryl, never in my life. And I told you the story why. I just have never felt like that guy. When I discovered Kiss and Alice Cooper and David Bowie, my life forever changed, and that's when the true development of Maxx Payne happened the day that I pulled my first Kiss 8-track out of an 8-track dispenser at a little Bowman's drugstore in Fortuna, California, a day that changed my life forever when I saw Kiss for the first time.
Is Kiss one of your favorite bands?
Absolutely. Kiss, Alice Cooper, David Bowie from the Aladdin Sane, Ziggy Stardust era. I love David Bowie altogether, but I really like that era of David Bowie and Black Sabbath. Those are probably the 4 biggest influences of my life musically.
Heck yeah. I'm a big fan of Kiss. Up on that wall, up there, I have a big collection of Kiss stuff. Over there, I have some stuff.
In fact, I will tell you a quick story about him. On December 14th, 1975, Kiss was playing at a ballroom in Salt Lake City, a ballroom, 2,000 people. And because the first show sold out so fast, they did back-to-back shows. And I went to see them. And after that show that night, when I went home, I had this dream. And I was standing on stage, and Ace Frehley handed me his guitar and said, "Okay, play." And so I put the guitar on, and it's hot, and I'm standing in front of a Kiss crowd, right? And I'm standing there, and I look down at the guitar, and I can't play it. I didn't know how to play yet. I hadn't taught myself how to play at the level I wanted to play. And I couldn't play Kiss songs. I didn't know how to play any Kiss songs at all. I would wake up sweating. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh my God, it's so. And I had that dream for the rest of my life until December 15th, 1992, when I played in front of a crowd, and the video is actually out there. I played in front of a crowd in Bremen, Germany, in front of 18,000 people at the last Otto Von show of the CW. It's a big, it's the big end of CWA tour show in Bremen. And I played my guitar in front of 18,000 people. And I'll never forget when I finished playing and I turned my guitar down, there was a delay for about a second and a half before the crowd started to cheer, and I thought, oh God, they hated it. And the crowd went nuts and exploded. And in Germany, it's so wonderful when the Germans love what you do. They have this thing they chant called Zugabend, which means they go Zugabend, Zugabend. And to hear a whole crowd doing that means do it again. It's their way of saying encore, encore, encore. And they started doing that, and I'm getting goosebumps just telling you the story. And I never had the dream again. That was it. The dream, I'd finally squelched the dream. So the Kiss dream went away on December 15th, I believe, 1992 in Bremen, Germany was the last time that I ever had that dream.
Well, that's awesome that you can remember like that exact date and everything. I mean, just
it was an amazing time.
Yeah, great.
That's how much I love Kiss, though.
Yeah,
I saw him 3 or 4 times, and I saw Love Gun. I saw Destroyer, and I think it was Rock and Roll Over. I think I saw the tour that was just. At the ballroom, it was still Kiss Alive, so they were still just playing their first 3 albums then. which are my favorite 3 albums. I like Destroyer, but after Destroyer, Kiss never had the appeal. To me, the first Kiss album is what makes Kiss so great, in my opinion, is their first album, that first Kiss album. It is such a great rock and roll album. I love every song on that album. And when I heard that the first time, I was driving around in Tuna, California, in my nephew's 1968 Pontiac Le Mans convertible, listening to an 8-track on a Bowman 8-track with 5.5-inch round speakers in the door. This was long before there were really nice stereos. And this was in 1974 when we found the first Kiss album in a drugstore named Bowman's as well. And my nephew, I showed it to my nephew and I go, "Oh my God, look at these guys, Ken." And he goes, "Oh my God, I'm buying that." And we bought that and we drove around that night, smoked dope, and listened to Kiss all night long. And it forever changed my life.
Wow. Yeah. I got to witness a Kiss concert at their recent final tour that they did here in Wisconsin. I got to see them. They did like a special thing.
Nice.
Potawatomi thing, and it was cool. I mean, I was way back in the back, but I mean, getting just
they're unparalleled. They're unparalleled in their stage show. There's no doubt about it.
Oh yeah. The curtain coming down and then just them starting and the last song was Rock and Roll All Night.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, yeah. They played that like it was nothing. Like it was. They had the confetti all everywhere. They had it. It was just great.
So great. It's Kiss, man. It's Kiss.
Uh-huh. If you could have any band or singer perform your theme song with you, who would you want that to be?
Oh, no doubt about it. Ozzy.
Oh, yes. That would be
yeah. It would have been Ozzy. I would have loved to work with Ozzy. To show what kind of a guy he was, when you see the homage that Birmingham gave to him, and Ozzy was just, he was a nut. Yeah, he did some crazy shit, but Black Sabbath, in terms of rock and roll and music, Black Sabbath had the most profound impact on me of all. No question about it.
Yeah. Ozzy was one of a kind. He was a great as well.
Truly great.
Mm-hmm.
Alice Cooper would be up there, but only for the albums up to Muscle of Love. I like Alice after Muscle of Love. Don't get me wrong. But his original band, Dennis Dunaway, Michael Bruce, all the original members of his band, that was the band I love. School's Out, Billion Dollar Babies, Killer, Love It to Death, Muscle of Love, all of the original. And part of the reason for that is something that Alice had in common with Kiss, is the producer, Bob Ezrin. Bob Ezrin had such a profound impact on the bands that I really loved. And Kiss and Alice Cooper are those bands.
Yeah.
Alice Cooper was probably, he wasn't probably, he was, I loved Alice Cooper before I loved Kiss. It's just that when I saw Kiss took it even to another level. And then there's one other band that I do have to mention that I absolutely loved and adored growing up, and they changed everything as well. They don't get near the credit they deserve, but they were amazing and had a tremendous impact on rock and roll. Was a band called the New York Dolls. And I loved the New York Dolls too. And they basically invented glam rock and was truly the first punk band. I don't care what anybody says. They were the first punk band that truly got any momentum and any steam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't heard of them. before.
Well, go look them up. You'll have fun. That's the problem with them. Their look was better than their music. They weren't very good musicians, but you'll get a kick out of them. Their first album is amazing, and their look. What was amazing about them is they were androgynous. They were the first band to just flat out dress like women, and take that level of music to a whole nother place. And ironically, the band that actually the band that they had more of an impact on than anybody was the biggest punk band that changed the world forever, was the Sex Pistols. So if you want to learn, go look up the New York Dolls, Blake. You'll have a good time with that.
Definitely will. And then I see that you have guitars in the back. I'm guessing you still play guitar to this day in your free time. Like, what are some of your hobbies that you do nowadays? Obviously, probably.
I've been so unlucky when it comes to my arms, man. I lost both my rotator cuffs. I've had neural surgery on both my arms, and I've had carpal tunnel. And there's a relief surgery for the nerves of your hands because my hands started to go numb. I haven't been playing a lot lately. I'm going to go back to playing a lot again, but I'm finally just getting to the point where my hands and shoulders and arms feel strong enough that I can start playing again. But even without playing, I love to build and fix guitars. So electronics of guitars is something I really love. I love the tone. I love, working on amplifiers and creating amplifier tones. And I love recording in my studio. So I don't just play the guitar. I play the piano. I play the bass. I play the drums with using now the new drum machines that are, and the drum programs that are available to you. Like I said, I'm very proficient in Pro Tools. And so I do I love that kind of stuff. I'm also an artist and a sculptor. So I do all kinds of different things artistically.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So you're good at basically everything.
Well, I don't know if I'm good at it, but I do it.
Right. Yeah.
I try.
Right.
And like I said, I'm gonna have music. More music is coming down the pipe. I really haven't released my music. I really have set in the background a lot of ways. I've got musical aspirations still, like I said, to go with the movie and so on and so forth. So.
Now, to wrapping up the interview, to touch up on some things, what is one thing you would want to tell your fans that have been supporting you throughout your whole career and still support you to this day?
Oh my God, thank you. And I'm really bad sometimes at not responding, and part of it is because I've been very removed from the business, and every time it seems like I end up coming back to the business, I end up leaving again with sort of a bad taste in my mouth. And so I would apologize to any fan I've offended. If you ever see me in public and I'm ever any place, if I've offended you or hurt your feelings in any way, please come and see me. I'll apologize to your face, and I'll do whatever it takes to rectify that situation. And to my fans out there and the people that, that still, obviously there must be some interest still out there in what I did, because I keep getting interview opportunities, and all I can say is thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your wrestling fans are so amazing. They're such amazingly devoted, incredible people. You're one of them, Blake. And all I can do is say, thank you for being a fan and understanding what we go through, and appreciating the how much of our lives that we have given to our fans, because we give a lot, just like any great out that is out there to perform and entertain you, we pay a high price. And there's a lot of dead wrestlers. I don't think we'll ever really truly understand all of the reasons behind that. But it's because we pay a very, very dear cost to entertain those that love us.
Definitely. And then for the last final question is, which I ask everybody at the end of my interviews, is, do you have any advice for me to become a pro wrestler?
I will tell you this. I can't tell you how many people, because I've trained a lot of people in the wrestling business. I ran a school for quite a while, and I can't tell you how many people I had come to my school, get in the ring, and hit the ropes like 3 or 4 times, jump out of the ring and leave and never come back, because they have an idea that somehow it's going to be easy. No matter how you look at wrestling, professional wrestling, it's fucking hard. And I mean, it is really, 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 really hard. But just like anything else, if you believe in yourself and you work and give it everything you've got, then all you can do is what you can do to give yourself every opportunity that you can to succeed in the wrestling business. And that still doesn't mean you're going to succeed. Just like nobody else who plays football or basketball or golfs or plays baseball or whatever. You can work your ass off your whole life and still never make it. But if you don't go into it with the reckless abandon that come hell or high water, you're going to stand on that WWF stage or WWE stage, that you're going to shoot for WrestleMania, main event WrestleMania, then why even bother? So if you're going to do it, then do it and go all the way and give it whatever it takes, 150%, and never look back. Because even if you die trying, at least you died being honest with yourself, that's what you died doing, what you love.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I thank you a lot for taking your time to do this interview. I hope to have you on in the future after you release your book. And I wish you good luck on getting that out and everything else in your future endeavors of what you're going to be doing and everything that's going to be happening. So
thank you so much, Blake. And I look forward to it. Like I said, get a hold of me when the book comes out. And if these other things come to fruition and, you go, oh my God, I mean it. I'd love to do an interview with you again.
Awesome. And is there where you want to shout out your platform so people can go follow you, subscribe or whatnot?
I think the best platform you could go check out, because that's where I'm going to go. Because I actually have one other thing that I'm going to be hawking in the nearest future is I've invented this oil that I use on my guitar that's actually really an amazing substance. And I'm going to be back on my YouTube channel in the very near future. And I also have this philosophy of life that came to me in sort of some dreams and visions. And it's all about positivity in your life. And I'm gonna start sharing those things in the very near future on the Pain Lair. So the best place to keep in touch with who I am and what I'm going to be doing is start with the Pain Lair, and I'll make sure that there are connections there to everything else I do, including this oil that I've invented called GLX. And like I said, we'll talk more down that road.
Definitely. Well, I thank you very much again, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you so much. Hey, will you text me some links, the link on how to get to this so I can give it to my wife and have her, she wants to see this interview. So if you wouldn't mind, text me the link just so I can share it with my friends.
For sure. I definitely will right after this.
Thanks, Blake.
Yep. See ya.
Have a great night.
Yeah, you too.